Hello and welcome to the DrivingMaul show here on Tuesday, the something of December, 8th of December. That's right. And we come to you at 8 p.m. every single Tuesday with the DrivingMaul show. And whilst the season might have ended here, down here in the Southern Hemisphere or here in New Zealand, because, hey, they're still playing rugby straight through summer in South Africa. That seems like a sensible thing to do. But don't worry, we will not stop. We will keep on going through all the way through until Super Rugby kicks off as well. And tomorrow, I am interviewing, I've gone blank for his name. That's really very poor, isn't it? The Southland CEO. We're going to review the season that Southland's had and what it's been like for him in his first year as a CEO of a province. Hopefully, I'm also lining up a couple more CEOs for chats and reviewing of the season as well. Do keep it right here. And joining me this evening to look back over the international part of the season, as always, is Mr. Stephen Harris. How are you doing, sir?
Well, thank you very much, Paul. Once again, a privilege and a pleasure to be on the TDN.
The privilege is all ours, or should I say, all our viewers. And also joining us is the Statsman, Boa. How are you doing, sir?
Very well. The highlight of my week. Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are on planet Earth joining this wonderful show. Great to be here and great to have you guys on.
And thank you. And folks, by the way, today we've just heard that breakdancing has been announced as an Olympic sport. And whilst Bo is laughing away there, he sees it as a joke. I see it as an opportunity. So if any of you know of anyone who might like to do a breakdancing podcast, then hey, New Zealand Sport Radio is the place for them because, hey, it's now a sport. Let's start covering it in the build-up to that Olympics. That's what I say. 2024 it is, so we've got a few years to try and educate the old fella, Stephen Harris, up there. He's obviously not doing his old wiggly army bits. And Boa's already got the shell suit on, so we're really there. But perhaps we're a bit 80s, and we need to bring it to be a bit more modern in the old hip hop. So there we go. Dearie me. So everyone who's joined us in the live chat, although don't forget you can join us in the live chat either via Facebook or YouTube or even Twitter for that matter, or you can listen to the recording. Just search New Zealand Sports Radio on your favourite podcatcher. This evening, as I say, we're going to look back over, we're going to review the international season, particularly for the Tri-Nations teams, and let you know how we think their seasons have gone and where that places them. Have they had a good season, a bad season, or or somewhere in between, just like we did for the Mitre 10 Cup teams as well. Also, during the post-match interview for the Maori All Blacks versus the Moana Pacifica, Ash Dixon made dropped a bit of a bombshell, and we'll see. We'll have a little chat about that one as well. We might also have time to talk about the structure of rugby in New Zealand. There's also been some news there, and we should probably have a quick chat about concussion, really. So let's kick off with concussion because we do have the tackle framework man here himself. Apparently they are building a case to take to court of 70 plus ex-rugby players, including All Blacks. One of them, Carl Heyman, is apparently one of the members who has given some scans and information to the lawyers who are putting the case together. They're looking at potentially taking a case against various national unions, maybe World Rugby as well. So we'll have to wait and see about sort of exactly how that all pans out. But Boa, have you been following this story?
Yeah, look, very much so. First of all, just a quick shout out to some of our regulars. See them on the live chat. Guys, thank you so much. It's quite humbling to see all you guys every week coming on, being interactive with the show. So massive shout out, much respect, much love. This is something. The last 4 years of my life, I've really put a lot of work into, a lot of research, worked very closely with ACC, especially with my safe tackle framework STF. This man with the red head, green feet, and blue torso. It's all about making rugby safer, compliant, but yet not losing the effectiveness and the spectator appeal as a contact sport. Now, what rugby has actually failed or allegedly failed to have done, I have to say the word allegedly, is they haven't done enough to keep its players safe from concussion. Now, one reason why the current high tackle framework has been brought along and why it was actually rushed. I've had a number of coaches who were preparing their teams for the previous Rugby World Cup in 2019 actually, write emails to me when I was doing my research saying, we were given a memo 3 weeks prior to the kickoff of the World Cup, and we said, these are the rules, this is the framework, we're going to police this quite heavily. And one of the results we saw 5 red cards and about 32 yellow cards even before the knockout stages came in. So concussion is very real. It's causing a lot of quite literally headaches and very serious injuries for the players involved in the sport. My personal view on this is that I'm actually 100% with these players. I don't think the sport of rugby as a whole is doing enough in the sense being consistent right across the board on making sure the sport is regulated and administered and the game being played on the field policed in a consistent manner so that it actually keeps the players safe. What we're actually seeing is a bit of a very inconsistent regime of policing, and this is something I'll get into later in the broadcast about the cards. Yellow cards, red cards. We're seeing the same infringement, different weeks, being given a different a consequence, a yellow card or a red card, rather than consistent right across the board. So this is a very real problem, and this is affecting the game at all age groups, especially junior participation. Right here in New Zealand, we've had a significant drop-off of children participating or entering the sport. And one of the reasons, the second most common reason in a research which was done as to why child participation rates are going down, is parents fearing concussion. So very real problem, gentlemen.
Absolutely. And anyone who says that concussions aren't real needs, well, I was going to say needs a head seat to. That's a bit of the wrong term. Really doesn't know what they're talking about. Clearly concussion is real and does happen. As far as this particular legal case goes, I mean, someone like Carl Heyman, for example, his career was from 1998 through, or his professional career, 1998 through till about 2015. So we're not talking. So as far as this case goes, we're not talking so much about what's happening nowadays, but historically, has World Rugby acted quickly enough and done enough to prevent prevent head injuries, concussions, and those sort of things? And is really, so this is more a historical case. That, I mean, there's a separate argument and a separate whole discussion around what's happening now and consistency of officiating, whether everyone still takes, whether everyone yet takes concussion seriously. I mean, we've heard stories from ex-players such as Cudmore, the Canadian international, who well-known and renowned strongman or hard man in rugby, being only what must be 2, maybe 3 seasons ago now, getting sent back out after supposedly failing a HIA because the other lot had got injured, and so hence he needs to go back out and fill the gap, and getting sent back out again in a top 14 game. So yes, clearly it has not got through at all levels to all teams. There's been great strides made. Let's be blunt. Have they been far enough? Have they been quick enough? Are open to discussion. And Stephen, when we had a chat a day or two ago, you mentioned about concussions that you've had suffered during games.
Yeah, but listen, I experienced it myself. It was one of the reasons why my own career ended. But I can remember getting getting knocked out to the point where I really didn't know how I even arrived at the game, and I was pretty much told to go home and have a rest, and there was a stand down for 3 weeks, and which I basically stood down, and then I decided I'd never worn headgear before. Came back probably the third week into coming back. The second time I got knocked out again, and that was pretty much the end of it. On the advice of a doctor, I was told to basically give the game away altogether. And to be honest, I was still receiving headaches, really sharp headaches, probably a year after I had retired. And it's not just your normal headache you can get from being dehydrated. It's almost like somebody's pressing on your brain. It really took a while to get rid of the headache. So it's really, really scary. Listen, I think what's unfolded, we shouldn't be surprised with this. We can think back to 2014 when Shontaine Hape, the former New Zealand Rugby League international, who also played rugby for England, but he was, I remember him saying in his article, even before he went professional as a league player, he must have been concussed about 20 times. And by the time he started playing professional rugby in England for Gloucester, just after the 2011 Rugby World Cup, he was actually starting to receive the headaches again. And of course, we know the demands of European rugby, and it probably got even stronger once he moved over to Montpellier, where, as we know, these French owners, they pay a lot of money for these rugby internationals, and, they want these guys on the field all the time. And I can recall that he shared that story in the New Zealand Herald back in 2014. Now, if there wasn't a couple of warning shots there, I guess there never was. But we could also think way back to Steve Devine, the former Auckland and All Black halfback as well, having to retire early. And that happened in the mid-2000s, I think, Boa.
That's correct. Look, one thing I have to say is there are, based on the work I've done, there are 3 key areas World Rugby needs to look at reducing this. Number one is, and this is the most important thing, guys, is education, coach education. Now, if you looked at the last 5 test matches over the weekend, I would say 70% of all contact is actually happening chest level and above. The reason is coaches at test level encourage players to minimize the ability for the ball carrier to offload in the tackle by using a technique called a choke or stack tackle. So what that means is, Stephen, for example, if you're a ball carrier, if you're coming at me, I would go very upright and try and go crest or chest on chest and dip very late. Now, this is a very effective way from a coaching point of view to stop the offload. But the problem with this is World Rugby have a guideline saying nipple line. So nipple line and above is a no-go zone. And if you have any contact with shoulder, anywhere around your head, it's a penalty, or it starts escalating into a yellow or red card. But because this whole issue of choke tackle, and I've seen a couple of videos from top referees actually commending and saying, defining what a legal choke tackle is. Gentlemen, let's be serious. The word choke tackle, that just, it doesn't give a good connotation. My framework, I look at replacing the choke tackle with an airbag tackle, where it's a lot more passive. And you see this line here, you tackle below that. So what World Rugby have to do is, I'm working with them at this stage to get safe tackle framework initiated. What we need to do is we need to educate our coaches and encourage them. See this line? Tackle below. So when we train our players, we have to ensure that they are compliant and we get this habit in. Number 2 is the easy route, which World Rugby have taken, this punitive route, where soon as there's head-high contact, out comes a card. But the problem here is, depending on the geographic location, different referees are starting to interpret it in different ways. Now, for example, we saw Ofatonga.
You're going over, as I say, you're going over stuff that's about now. The story that's out now is about about historical stuff that's been going on, whether World Rugby has done enough in the past. Stephen goes back to 2014 with Shorten Happy. I'll go back to 2011 when Ben Robinson, who was a 14-year-old playing rugby at school, got 3 blows to his head and was sent back onto the field and died through concussion. So I mean, we've known about head knocks killing people, right? For at least for at least a decade. We've known it causes damage to people for at least that length of time, and yet when we come to the as you say, it was only 3 weeks before the 2019 Rugby World Cup that we had a framework that said, "Hey, you're going to get more red cards," and that's 9 years after, or sort of 9 years after someone who's died, and it's been publicised in the press, and we've known about the dangers here, and nothing is, and that's not fair. Things have happened, and there's been awareness campaigns, and we have seen small changes in behaviour. But
Paul, I'm just going to interject. We don't actually have to look at historical failures. Let's look at the failures in the current context. If you look at the last 10 yellow or red cards with contact to the head, there's only been one HIA. That's right, only one HIA. So if you were going to argue this in a court of law, it's a no-brainer. You look at the last 100 yellow cards, and you look at what has been put in place, what education has been there. Now, everyone knows World Rugby have this guideline saying nipple line, but because there is no visual guideline, it's a no-brainer. It's an absolute no-brainer. The problem is, rather than simplifying this whole issue, we're just muddying the waters by trying to add layer upon layer upon layer, all complicated stuff. And also, let me also give you the example of the blue card. How many blue cards have you seen in the last couple of seasons?
Blue cards are only at the amateur level, and yeah, you're right. I mean, Stephen and I got around to a whole bunch of club games, as Bella, you're aware. You're at every week at a club game. I never saw it. I've never seen a blue card ever given out.
Guys, I'm actually waiting for the team that's actually got the courage to actually put a tackle line on their jersey. Seriously, I know we all like our colour on the jerseys, but I actually quite like the idea of a tackle line. And if you've got a tackle line on your jersey, I think it'll create a bit of awareness for the actual tacklers. And then and if they do get penalised, I think there's just simply no argument.
We've seen it happen in pro rugby over in the USA, which only lasted 1 year. They had a very, very thin red line as a guide. It wasn't very clear. It wasn't, but it was there. Now we've not seen anyone else, as you say, take it up yet. I think from a legal point of view, look, we've known this is coming. NFL's had it. As soon as NFL had their legal court case, which got settled out of court with 9 or 10 figure settlement fee, is in the billions, that we knew that rugby was going to get there sooner or later, right? It was coming. The question has always been kind of really more when, and kind of how big is that number going to be? Because as Bo's quite rightly said, you just have to look at what's happened at last weekend to go, you're not doing enough to stop head high tackles. And therefore we are going to get somebody now is going to have to pay now with the financial situation that the sport is in. That is a pretty scary prospect, because let's be blunt here, none of the unions have got spare cash anymore. The RFU has somehow managed to spend all its profits from the 2015 and has been sacking people. New Zealand Rugby has been saying for years that it is running a unsustainable deficit or loss. If you're talking about a proper company, rather than basically mean a loss anyway. We've known for years that Australia is on the brink of bankruptcy the whole time, so yes, is there money to pay out this? Who knows what impact that will be having on the sport going forward, purely from a financial point of view as well.
Just a quick question: do players that have been involved with a heavy concussion that's taking time to resolve, do they have CT scans? Because I know back in 2014, when the young rugby player up north, Jordan Kemp, who was only 17 years old, and man, as a parent, you don't send your kids off to to find that they're going to get a head injury that ends their life. But I remember at the time his grandfather suggested that players should have CT scans at, maybe, I don't know, every 2 years or 1 year, just to have a look to see what the brain's doing.
Yeah, look, one of the really effective protocols is unarmed combat sport, i.e., mixed martial arts and boxing. They have mandatory stand-down periods, mandatory medical checks when you get your professional fighter's license, and if you get knocked out, there's a mandatory stand-down period, and there's a battery of tests you have to go through. So I think in professional rugby, that's inevitable. But the crux of the matter is, rather than create what I would call an audit culture, we actually need to create a culture where players, administrators, coaches take player welfare seriously because they want them to be safe, not because you're going to get a lawsuit or anything else.
Yeah,
I think that is the crux of the matter.
A lot of World Rugby's actions have looked like, okay, how do we avoid a lawsuit rather than actually make the game safer? I was listening to Potholes and Penguins, which is a podcast out of Ireland, and one of the players on there admitted that they used to basically fail their, or they would. You have a pre-season cognitive test, and they would deliberately be bad at it. So when they got tested after they had a head knock, they had more chance of passing it. And sometimes they would have a head knock, be concussed, and actually return a better result than when they did their pre-season one because they deliberately failed it so badly. That kind of culture in rugby has got to go, essentially. We have a lot of other things to chat about, but clearly, look, it's something that as you can tell, as a podcast, we feel passionate about, and it is a danger not only to people, it's also a danger to the sport as well. Not only through this court case and how much whether it will bankrupt the sport, but also through participation numbers, as Beau was pointed out earlier along this.
Yeah, Paul, thank you for taking the time to talk about this, and thank you all the fans responding as well, because this is an area I'm very passionate about. I am going to, one way or the other, I'm going to get safe tackle framework implemented, and I'm absolutely hell-bent on making a change, a positive change, so that rugby becomes a safer yet spectator-friendly contact sport.
Yeah, I go along with Bora as well, and I'm really coming from the angle of Bora spoke about parents, not wanting the kids to play this game. I want the kids to play this game and feel safe, so we can see our next Caleb Clarks or whoever come through the ranks, and also with regards to smaller kids as well. So so smaller kids don't have to be intimidated by big kids. I've seen some horrible video footage of some smaller kids getting absolutely hit really hard by big kids, and you can hear all the chahooing on the sideline and that sort of thing. Just absolutely does my head. And if you're a mother or father watching that, man, you'd never want your kid near a rugby field again. But Paul, I just want to talk all what Boyd just said. Thank you for taking the time for this. But yeah, looking forward to talking about these world rankings.
I wasn't going to go straight onto world rankings, but I was going to say let's review the All Blacks, the Pumas, and the Wallabies, and say what we think of their season. Let's we'll go in reverse table order in the Rugby Championship and start off with the Wallabies. Finished last in the Tri Nations with 1 win, 2 draws, and a loss. Also picked up before that a draw and a loss against the All Blacks in the Bledisloe Cup games. So what's that? 1 win, 3 draws, and 2 losses is their end of season record against the All Blacks and against Argentina. I can see Stephen already shaking his head there. So, Dave Rennie, how's he doing as a as the new Wallabies head coach?
Listen, I think we probably have to put an asterisk there somewhere because he's introduced a lot of young guys. Selection-wise, I think he made some huge errors in that first return match across in Australia, where he sort of put out a very, very inexperienced second five centre centre pairing, and unfortunately they were horribly exposed in that game. But I do believe he's got enough to work with there. I don't know if he has real quality in some specific positions. Still trying to obviously find a first five who's comfortable in that particular role. To me, James O'Connor looks better at first five than what Reece Hodge does, but Reece Hodge obviously got the better kicking game. Unfortunately, just couldn't put over the kicks that really counted. They'll probably, you'd probably arguably say their best performance was their victory over the All Blacks, but I reckon their best performance was the very first game that they played the All Blacks in Wellington, because they really and truthfully deserved to win that game, but for a coat of paint's probably the most bizarre game of the lot. But listen, all in all, he wouldn't be happy, but at least he's got something to work with moving forward.
Boa, how do you think? How do you think he's gone this? In his first season.
Look, Reddy's done what I would call a above average job. I wouldn't say anything more. I was expecting a lot more from him because he's a very smart coach. I mean, I've done a bit of work with and under him, attending a few courses. Really smart, astute man. But for me, the biggest question mark and the most blunderous sort of team selection was in that clutch game against the All Blacks, which was the Bledisloe Cup decider. He comes out with a very, very inexperienced team, and it gets absolutely thumped. Now, I discussed this and I predicted this would be the case, and that's exactly what happened, because All Blacks decided to turn up that day. They stepped it up for about 20 minutes, and it was game over. It was game, set, match, and you have to play. You have to have a game plan and tactics for the cattle you have. And also the very last game, which they drew, and mind you, I did call it, didn't I? It was either Argentina going to win by 3 or less, or unlikely outside draw. And what happened? It was a draw. The Wallabies declined 5 shots which were kickable at goal in the first 25 minutes. They just kept doing the same thing, expecting a different result. And what happened? Argentinians turned the ball over in the lineup. Now, to me, those are brain-dead tactics. All you have to do is take a deep breath, get the message on, and say, guys, get the kicking tee out. Let's slow this down. Let's take the points. Because even if you miss the goal, it's a 22 dropout. They kick right back at you. So I thought it was really poor tactics. Also, I'm not trying to be too unkind. I think the first game, they played really well against the All Blacks. All Blacks didn't really turn up. And the game, they beat the All Blacks. Well, that was pretty poor by the All Blacks. Looking at the statistical pattern where it's the outlier game, where they play away from the traditional venues, and they were playing in Brisbane at Suncorp Stadium, a venue the All Blacks had historically struggled. I thought the All Blacks should have rolled out their best possible side, and they paid the price for it. So for me, I think it's a D+. He hasn't got the greatest of players to work with. I don't see much of that changing.
Sorry, a D+ or a B+?
A D. D. That's it. Yep.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, and I can see he's using St. Kitts, the wonderful Academy of St. Kitts, to start drafting some players in. So, again, I'm not so sure whether that's the right way home. And again, there were a lot of inconsistencies, based on what he said and what we saw over the entire Tri-Nations. And keep in mind, Australia had absolute home advantage, and they had the best scheduling out of all the teams. So for me, it was.
Let me just bring some sense to this conversation. Then, coming into this, Dave Rennie basically had if you look, a very inexperienced side. Pretty much most of the best players had headed overseas, and he had the people he could actually pick from was when you look at what he's got available to him, I think was pretty forward. Coming off a pretty toxic previous regime with Checker, he also had off-field issues with the CEO getting sacked, and would Australian rugby go bust, or would it even exist next year as off-field distractions? And I think if we look at that first game, as Stephen has said, being their best game, you could see the players go out there and they were wanting to play for their coach. which I don't think we saw under Checker so much. They only played when they were scared of him, when he shouted at them. Whereas to me, I think he's brought the right culture, or a good culture, to build on in there. We've seen that with the with also. I think if he hadn't been around, we wouldn't have seen Dane Helen-Petty suggest having the national anthem being sung in a First Nation language rather than just in English. And I think he's brought a lot of that. He's put a lot of building blocks in place. We are talking about here about a brand new coach at the beginning of a 4-year cycle towards Rugby World Cup that's trying to discover how his play, which of his young players with very little experience will be able to cut it at international level. So he's going to do some rotation. He's going to try a few things out. Did it work for that game back over in Australia, the Bledisloe Cup decider? No, it didn't. But injuries to James O'Connor and Matt Tamua, who are key players for that side, I think also hindered him. So to me, I would definitely give him a B for how he's gone, in considering what he had to work with, where he is in the World Cup cycle, and the way we've seen them play, or at least the effort from the players. I think he's got them heading in the right direction. Is there a lot of work to do? Absolutely, but I'd expect there to be a lot of work to do under the situation.
Yeah, he's got you've got to remember. You're right, Paul. He did bring in a lot of players. You got Harry Wilson at number 8, who looked really, really good. You've also got the big aggressive blindside flanker from New South Wales. He was the boy that got either a yellow or a red card. I think it might have been a red card.
Lachlan.
Yeah, Lachlan. Yeah, he got a red card as well. And some of those guys, they are pretty fresh in the scheme of things. And I think Paul's right. Losing Tamua was absolutely huge, because Tamua defensively is a very, very good player. So they lost a lot there. If they probably look back at a few things that they do different, I think next time you've got to take the points on offer, especially when you're playing a team like Argentina that's niggly, that will basically put everything in at the breakdown. They'll be there or thereabouts. Listen, if we're having the same conversation in 12 months' time, then yes, there's an issue. But I can see, you know what? I can see more going for this team than when they were under Checker. Beg your pardon. I think these guys have got more. You look at right the winger Dalguni. They'll also have the Melbourne Storm winger, who will be a sensation. Vunivalu, when he comes about, Kodabeki. You know, they've probably got more firepower out wide than they've had for a very, very long time. It's just a matter of getting your combinations right. You know, in a perfect world, you'd probably have the likes of Tumua and Jordan Pataya as your midfield, but we never saw that combination together. They've also, we shouldn't forget, they've got a very good halfback in Nick White as well. So they've got the ingredients there to make it happen. And I think probably a C I'd go for. But if we're having the same conversation or seeing the same pictures this time next year, then maybe look at an F.
So there you go. B, C, and D. Not only from the three of us on the show, but also in the live chat as well. We've had B, C's, and D's in there. So yes, depends. I guess it depends what you're measuring him against. I think is really one of the big things here for us. Nocturnal right, second row is better for the Wallabies than before, absolutely, except one of them's going overseas. So again, starting from scratch again, and that's going to be his big issue, is keeping the players that he wants to keep in Australia.
I was going to say one other thing. They have got some players in there at the moment with the Tongan Thor, Taniela Tupou, the likes of Harry Wilson, Jordan Pataya at centre. Man, they've got the potential to produce some real world-class players over the next few years. I'm still not convinced if they found the right first five. They kind of feel like the Blues did about three or four seasons ago, struggling to find a first five. But I think they also introduced another young prop as well. Named Bell, and Angus Bell or something like that. He just only a young guy. So yeah, I don't know. I've got a bit of hope for them.
Yep.
My biggest grouse is obviously not taking the shots at goal, and also the last game against Argentina, they play this pattern 1-3-3-1 attack pattern. They kept doing that 16 times. They coughed up 4 turnovers. They got 3 penalties, which they all declined. And to me, that shows wanting to do the same thing over and over again and not wanting to change. And because I hold Dave Rennie in such high regard, because I know what he is as a tactical, strategic thinker, it's very, very disappointing to see that sort of thing from a coaching point of view. So, Paul, you're absolutely correct. Depends what yardstick you take. I look at the numbers. I look at the technical coaching aspects of the game. So, for that reason, that's why I give him a D+.
Yeah, hey, they would have sacked Alex Ferguson after the first 2 years with Manchester United, based on some of his results. So I guess it's one of those things. We'll give him a little bit of time and see how it plays out.
Absolutely. So they finished 6th in the world rankings, which feels probably about right, to be honest with you. Moving on then to Argentina, who are finishing 8th in the world rankings. They had 1 win, 2 draws, and 1 loss from their 4 games this season. Wow, only 4 internationals this season when you think the All Blacks normally have 14, which, yes, it's a strange year, let's be blunt. But that strange year also included their 39th game, was it? Or 39th or 40th game against the All Blacks, which was their first ever win against the All Blacks. Plus, then they say they have their 2 draws and their 1 loss. Let's talk about their on-field stuff before we talk about their off-field stuff, because that might be a different ranking for how they are off the field as to where they are on the field. Who did I start with last time? I started with Stephen last time. Boa, give us your thoughts on how Argentina went this year and their ranking.
Oh, look, A for awesome, amazing. I've got to give these guys an A-. What these guys had to go through, and especially without playing test footy for 402 days, they turn up and they wallop a full strength All Black side. Well, okay, wallop's probably a bit of a stretch, but they beat them up front. They physically outmuscled them. Tactically, they outthought them. They took their kicks at goal. They had this perfect blueprint of how to beat the All Blacks. They played territory. They played the game in the right part of the field, and it was wonderful to see. The All Blacks they were rattled. They had no idea how to hit back. And also, guys, I mean, having gone through what they had as a nation, as a country, to have the courage and spine to front up, go through all those quarantine procedures, put a team on the park on the day and play with that sort of passion and machismo and beat the, arguably, I'm being a bit biased here, world's number 1 side in the eyes of many. Simply an unbelievable feat. And those 2 draws, they were. Yeah, Stephen says, Paul says 3rd on the rankings. Yep, that's the ranking. But then again, the world champions, they're playing dodgeball. They didn't show up. And they made a mockery of this whole theory.
Anyway, we're not about South Africa. They don't deserve talking about because they didn't show up.
Yep.
We're going to stay on Argentina.
No, yeah. All I'm saying is, I think in my eyes, they're the real Tri-Nations champions, having gone through what they have, the type of performances they put out, and also it really inspired a lot of people, and it actually got people thinking and watching the rugby because it started getting interesting. So for me, had they picked the Wallabies on a couple of occasions, which I think they could have, and also this goes back to a couple of goal kicks which they missed, but overall, I think on field, A-, A for awesome.
Stephen, are you going to agree with Boa, or are you going to end up with a full range of rankings like we did for?
Listen, you really couldn't grade them. You'd have to give them an A in terms of a grading. Just simply, Boa pretty much said it all in terms of where they come from. I mean, to say that victory over the All Blacks, it was comprehensive. It was actually probably more comprehensive than Australia's victory over the All Blacks easily, and defensively it was such a good effort. It almost reminded me of the Crusaders from the early 2000s, how they were able to grind teams down but take their opportunities when they were on offer, but they also introduced a couple of new centres. One that's coming to Auckland, Santiago Choka something or other. I don't know his full.
To be coming to Auckland, he hasn't actually.
There you go. I mean, to say for a guy on debut, boy, he looked after Jack Goodhue big time in that game. And man, they actually showed a lot of heart. Yeah, sure, they dropped their standard in that 38 nil loss to the All Blacks, but there were a lot of mitigating circumstances after that game. They obviously wanted to put it their best foot forward against Australia in the final game, so hence they rested some guys. But I think the other good thing, I think they've kind of moved on from somebody like Augustine Creevy, who was the skipper of Argentina for many years as well, and they've just shown they've actually got guys to replace Augustine Creevy, because he was a big part of how that side was run. So no, they get an A.
Yeah, guys, one other thing I have to say is the Pumas 96% tackle completion rate. That's unheard of at test level. Usually the best sides make about 91%. Now you compare that against the Wallabies when they got thumped 40 plus points. The Wallabies missed 32 tackles. Their tackle completion rate was an abysmal 17%. So there you go.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think we have to go with an A. There's a couple of B's in the live chat there, but mostly with A's. I think I'll probably go A- as well. Nocturnal Right says, game plan was simple. Big defense, win penalties, and kick goals. Also snipe the odd breakout try. And I think for me, that's why I'd put the minus in there, is that it was all on big defense. And they didn't really look like scoring many tries. I think it wasn't until their last game that someone other than Nicolas Sanchez actually scored a point for them. So it's a limited game plan that was executed fantastically well. And given, as you say, the lack of rugby that they've had, the amount of quarantine that they've had to do, it was fantastic. But again, if we're talking about them in the same way next year, a bit like with Australia, they need to evolve that game to add something to it. But it was a massive. It was a big step, a big statement season for them. I think that a level now that they can't let themselves slip back from. For me. So yes, Kramer was a beast of a player. Look, there was beasts of players all over the shop for Argentina. Let's be honest. And Batman, hey, good to see you joining us as well in the live chat there. So moving on then to the All Blacks, 2 wins and 2 losses to win the Tri Nations. We just lost Stephen for a second there. He's all gone black. Plus also a draw and win in their Bledisloe Cup games. So 3 wins, 1 draw, 2 losses. But as Aaron Smith said on Twitter, at the end of the day, they won both pieces of silverware that were up for grabs. So from that point of view, you could say it was a successful season. But Boa, your thoughts on the All Blacks season that's with those results?
Okay, so let's look at the positives. Absolutely, they won. Yep. And the points differential was incredible. I mean, they scored 16 tries to conceding only 4. So 4-1 ratio. And also when they were hot, they were, scintillating. When they decided to show up and turn up, which they did on 2 occasions, simply and utterly brilliant. And there was this sense of anticipation. Every time they touched the ball or they had a quick recycle, something special was going to happen. But the negatives for me was those 2 games where they looked like they just didn't want to be there. And if we were to critique effort, and this is not something I ever thought that I would see in my lifetime following the All Blacks, and I would ever critique, is their effort and wanting to actually be on the field. Now, that game they lost to the Pumas, GPS stats back what I'm saying, it's pretty abysmal. Most of the guys were actually ambling from place to place. I'm not going to go into those stats, but simply and utterly unacceptable by the high.
How do you get GPS stats for the All Blacks?
I'm not going to go into that.
He's hacked them.
I am the stats expert. I am resourceful, so there are ways. But then you contrast that against the Bledisloe Cup decider, where we absolutely thumped the Wallabies into the next millennium. the speed at which the ball was kept live in play was incredible. I don't think anyone, even if they brought their A game, could have kept up with the All Blacks, and that's why you saw all those missed tackles. And then again, that initial start, it was a very slow start. Again, they were ambling. They didn't look like they wanted to be there. Some of those kicking tactics we have to question. Borden Barrett, in fact, had 10 from 10 kicks, which not one kick in that drawn game was actually contestable. So again, it was, wasteful. And then also from the coaching department, I mean, this has been very well documented. My goodness me, the entire country turned on Ian Foster after that loss to the Pumas. And then you compare that against someone like Mario Ledesma, the Pumas coach, tactically and strategically, and also in front of the camera, was chalk and cheese. So we pretty much had this whole nation and all these All Blacks fans right around the world questioning their attitude and effort. Now, to me, that's a real sticking point from a coaching point of view. So for that reason, I'd give them an honourable C.
Stephen?
Chris Harry makes a good point. The All Blacks, for winning 2 trophies in a year with only a 50% win rate. Who else has ever done that? I don't know if there's many teams that have actually done that. I'm yet to find them. To me, here we go, Batman. Paul Stephen, rest in peace, the All Blacks aura from 2005 to 2015. Yeah, good on you. Listen, for me, there are some warning signs. What I still see is inconsistency in selection, because I think if you're trying to mold a team and get consistency, I think you've got to get consistency into your selection, getting the right team on the paddock at least 95 to 100% of the time. The other thing that I'm seeing as well, and I've actually seen this for the last 2 or 3 years, is the ill discipline. And I'm talking about penalty ill discipline, and also ill discipline in and around cards. And of course, another red card. And that's on the back of another red card from, who was it, Scott Barrett last year. So we seem to be getting a little bit consistent when it, consistently inconsistent when it comes to cards at the moment. So it's something we've obviously not sorted out. And when you've got all this happening in your game, you can't develop your game. You're keeping the teams that you're playing against in the contest for a very long time. Once upon a time, good All Black teams would weather the storm. It might be close at half time, but usually the team that's playing the All Blacks has put so much effort in that by the time the All Blacks went out in the second half, they'd probably, within the space of 10 minutes at times, take that game away from the other team. And that's, to me, that's a concerning thing. We are just not seeing that. And I'm starting to sort of question, the All Blacks have lost, there's some great players that have moved on. It's well documented the number of players that they've lost after the World Cup. And, somebody like Kieran Reid comes to mind. And that's just in terms of leadership. I look at this current All Black team, and whilst I think Sam Cane gets a tick in the box for the way that he's played, I think there are some little question marks to me around his leadership, and unfortunately that really more or less came through with an off-field interview, guys. So it was almost like, I agree with Boer, it's almost like they were there or thereabouts but not there, and that's why I'm giving them a C.
Yeah, I think it's like, there's a whole bunch of comments here in the live chat, I think, that are very true. I think Batman's comment about the All Blacks aura, I think we've been saying for a while now, the All Blacks aura has been diminishing a bit, and part of that is just how regularly other teams play them nowadays. They don't have the same kind of there isn't the same mystique. They know the players, they know who they're playing against. I think there's also comments in there about the sense of entitlement. Now, I'm not sure if entitlement is necessarily the right one. I would say complacency going into games. As you say, that first game against the Pumas, the standard that they were playing at was not the standard they played at in the following game when they picked themselves up and they turned around. Whereas if you think about under Graham Henry, under Steve Hansen, would they allow the variation in standard in level of play to be what it is now, or would Richie McCaw, more to the point, allow the variation of standards between games? I don't think so, and so I think there's a big thing there around that sort of things.
Paul, there was one game which to me stands out where they actually were so rattled they weren't able to change their tactics. And Boa talked before about a team doing the same thing and expecting a different result. And that was the loss to Argentina, where they were so rattled, so basically intrinsically stuck in their head that they should stick to their game plan of trying to take on the Argentinians around the middle of the field, as opposed to playing down into the red zone and putting a bit of pressure on the Argentinians to come out. That for me was a feature game in terms of where tactics needed to be changed. Where in the past we've seen either Richie McCaw or Kieran Reid change the tactics. Listen, we're going to pick and go for a while. We've actually tried to move the ball sideways, and that's what I'm looking for. Just the change of plan, or a little action game plan change. Or
how much did that loss to the Pumas remind you of that loss to England in the semi-final of the Rugby World Cup? Right,
it was carbon copy, and they looked like a rabbit in front of the headlights. They just could not kind of change what they were doing. And also, real bugbear for me is from a tactical point of view. I mean, guys, we need to kick our goals in tight games. We have to admit that we won't be able to score 4+ tries. Whenever the points are on offer, we have to master the art of actually kicking goals to win games, as how the Pumas, clearly demonstrate. And also from tactical kicking, we have to learn to play in the right part of the field. I know all this sounds really basic, but if you look at the stats and numbers, the All Blacks struggle when the pressure is on and they have to play back in their own half. And also, I'm not a big fan, Steve and Paul and everyone else, of picking players out of position. I mean, we've had some stunning players, and the best example is when Will Air Jordan came on. It was a breath of fresh air. It was a bit of innovation. Rather than targeting the man in defense, he was targeting the ball. He was looking, he was looking for opportunity. And what does he do? Score 2 tries back to back. So with all this firepower, why is it that we have to pick players out of position and play them? And when they keep bungling along, we just keep persisting with it. To me, it makes very little sense.
Brian Habana was the master of attacking the ball. And if you think back to the number of intercepts that he picked off, some people would say to me, "Oh, that was lucky." And I said, "No, that's not lucky. That's actually reading. That's actually reading the game."
Absolutely. Will Jordan, how many times has he done it at Mitre 10? And he just, he took that learning onto the field and he did it. And that, from a coaching point of view, you can't ask anything more of a player.
People make their own luck at the end of the day, quite often. And yes, that time it might have been lucky, but the other 90 times it was, the other 90% of the times it was unlucky. Yes, so it's one which depends which way you want to look at it. But Aaron makes a point. Is it a case of listening to the same old things over and over because the coaches and management repeating the previous coaches and management? Yes, have the players become tired of the message, and that's true. Nocturnal writes, prediction: Beauden Barrett is a busted flush. No. It's about a 2-time World Player of the Year here. Beauden Barrett is not a busted flush. The problem, I think, also there is a problem with selection. Is currently New Zealand's best 15 players are not the best team, and by that I mean you've got too many. You've got your players. You've got multiple fullbacks. You've got multiple 5/8s that you're trying to shoehorn into a team. You've got multiple 7s or 6s you're trying to shoehorn into a team, and that at the moment the balance is wrong. But he appears to be trying to get the best 15 players on the park, which is not always the best way to go.
Yeah, the word I would use, guys, is Frankensteining. You remember the movie Frankenstein, where Victor is put together with, the horse's heart, the pig's head, blah, blah, blah. And really, guys, with the amount of talent we have in this country, there's really no need to do that. We pick the best players in position, play them consistently, give the right pool of players a go. And I think most of these problems will disappear. And it's going to be a very, very different beast every single time the All Blacks go on the field.
So am I going to go B or C? It's difficult, isn't it? It's somewhere in there. I'm probably a C, maybe a C plus. I'll be there on that one, because yes, they have got the cups, but not in the way that we would expect or want them to. Now, I want to play a little video, guys. It'll just take a short while, a short video, and then we'll have a discussion about what Ash Dixon has got to say about Maori teams.
A few words on one sort of the concept and the word my shows on here. Like, how was it for you just to be playing against the team that tell you what said about it and possibly being Super Rugby going forward?
Yeah, that's definitely about my pay grade, but I guess my opinion is on those guys. I'd like to see something like that. I think it's great for culture, it's great for Pacific. They're chomping at the bit to get a compliment and, to resolve as well, as well. That's a good team, some amazing ones. But anything that we can create diversity or bring more teams in to create culture or opportunity for players in the countries, and whatnot, why couldn't we do that? Why do we have to sit, I guess, in a concept where that we can better others and better people and make the game actually better? And I think it's a great way to do it.
Is that just an off-the-cuff thought, or have you talked about that with teammates and things like that?
Well, that's just me saying how it is. I think that's just how I feel about it. I'm not here to start naming with anyone, but that's just my feeling, and I think those guys you can see the love that they were for each other. The Tongans, the Samoan boys, and the Fijian boys, they came to play and do their thing out there. So, if I opened up doors for islands and those ones,
So he's not here to start an argument, he says, but he has dropped a bombshell there. Boa, your thoughts? Should there be a Maori All Blacks or a Maori Super Rugby team?
Well, I have to say, Ash Dixon sounded very statesmanly there. I think there's a career in waiting after rugby. Might be another candidate from the Maori Party. Definitely. I mean, the way he spoke was very to the point. Look, I think it's a great idea, and I'll tell you why, guys. I think channeling some of that resources from some of the local EV into sport will create a whole different economy altogether. Will create a whole different set of social opportunities and a lot of sort of sub opportunities right around it, because rugby is something which really connects communities right across this nation. So I think it's a wonderful idea, and also it'll give opportunities for people within the local EV, i.e. coaches, administrators, suppliers into teams. So I think it's a wonderful opportunity. It's got to be taken and seen in a positive way. It's got to be administered, structured in a positive, professional manner, which will seamlessly fit in to the current available structures. And of course, I think long term it's got to be sustainable. So, but I think he's on to a real gem there, and really love the way he speaks. Much respect and aroha.
Stephen?
Yeah, the more I thought about it, when it was originally sort of spoken about, or when you told me about the interview, I thought, not so sure about that. But the more I think about it, and Boa makes a really good point with regards to sort of touching base with our communities, and especially those Maori communities where a lot of Maori boys have actually fallen off the radar when it comes to playing the 15-man game. We also, just to give you an example, up in Northland, there's a lot of kids that have been actually in recent times that have actually been taken out of Northland and taken over to play NRL, and are making a really, really good fist of it. Somebody like former Kiwi Adam Blair is one of those kids that was taken out of Northland, and we've also seen it with the Parramatta standoff, Darren Brown, as well, out of Northland. So I think on a good thing, it actually creates a lot of opportunities. I'm not sure if it's gonna, if something like that will go ahead, or even if the New Zealand Rugby Union are allowed. But people often talk about the Polynesian contribution to New Zealand rugby, but boy, Māori have a big contribution to New Zealand rugby as well. Yeah, to me, I would love it.
So yeah, as you say, yeah, the Maori do have a big contribution, and the Maori All Blacks or the New Zealand Maori, depending on what name you would obviously been rebranded, is something that has been marginalised and given less and less games every year. And yet it's a team that the public want to see more and more of.
Paul, I was going to say I know there was something I recall reading a piece a couple of years ago, and I must admit it came from an activist. But sometimes you've got to read these articles with open mind, and it was basically in and around where Maori rugby was only, I think it was around about the time that the AIG contract had been renewed, and part of that contract was for New Zealand Maori to play 2 or 3 games in 1 year, and this particular activist had mentioned he'd spoken to somebody from the rugby union, and they thought it was a little bit of a pain in the neck because the All Blacks were the top players were already playing X amount of rugby. But this activist actually said, "Well, hang on, New Zealand rugby, you'll gladly use Maori logos, you'll gladly use the haka, me waiata, a lot of Maori culture, but you kind of refuse to give something back." I mean, so for example, what I loved about Saturday, the Mana Pacifica game, that should happen every year. But the first thing you will hear is, where do we fit that in? There's always seems to be a barrier or a hand that goes up first before an idea.
Well, okay, so that question was asked during the interviews. And if I'd known you were going to say that, I'd have clipped out Clayton McMillan's response. But effectively, yeah, as you said, it's a crowded calendar. So where do you where does it fit in? Again, player welfare and playing too many games has got to be something that we bake into whatever new season we get into. Unfortunately, it's quite clear that we discussed a little bit on Sunday night on the Rugby Review Show. Now it's supposed to be reviewing games, so I try to keep it off this going too far down this rabbit hole. We will. If there's been a missed opportunity. Let's be blunt, in restructuring the world calendar. It's not going to happen now. COVID has been has been missed. But Aaron says, would it dilute the strength of? Would it dilute the Super Rugby teams? Well, you've got to say if the Moana Pacifica is going to be taking players that could be in the Super Rugby teams. So whether you have it as a Pacifica team, whether you have it as what doesn't matter what. You could suggest the Sunwalks diluted or took players away from Super Rugby sides because a lot of New Zealand players played in that as well. So that's an argument from out for the number of teams within Super Rugby rather than whether there should be a Maori team or not.
I would argue against that. It will not dilute Super Rugby player base. I'll tell you why. Because of COVID-19, the influx of players coming back into the country who want to have contracts centrally regulated, i.e. at Mitre 10 level and Super Rugby, the numbers have increased. And that's why we actually last week when we did the podcast, we saw some really talented players actually miss out. And that's one reason, guys. And there are a number of other players who are sitting in the fringes who could easily make it into that group of players, but they can't because you have a cap for the 5 Super Rugby franchises.
We'll have to see how long that lasts for. And obviously, because the top 14 is going to be back up and running next year by all accounts, and players are already up there training. So those players, so you Kieran Reid, for example, and there's other players as well who were made available for Mitre 10 won't be available next year, and could potentially have been available for Super Rugby if the top 14 hadn't gone ahead. So there's an element of, as COVID declines or as it gets sorted out, then that pressure or that attraction to come back here will dissipate as well. Assuming that the RFU and the French Federation don't get totally bankrupted by the concussion legal bill, then I think there'll still be that power to move overseas. So there will be an element of that that I think.
So, guys, quick question before the whole parting shots. Will I get an opportunity to talk about the yellow cards and the red card from the weekend?
No.
No,
You didn't tell me pre-show that you wanted that was a topic, and I have another topic to talk about, which we're not going to have time to talk about this week. So absolutely no. If you're not going to let me know pre-show, then there won't be time for it, I'm afraid. So we'll have to. We can talk about consistency of refereeing and yellow and cards another time during the off season. We can definitely touch on that.
We'll probably need 2 episodes for that.
Dearie me. So one of the things we do like to try and avoid doing is bashing the sport and complaining about referees. So we'll try and keep it within a constructive manner, a conversation. So it'd be interesting. So Stephen, where would you have this team play, or would you have it as a travelling team around the whole country?
Oh, that's a good question. I'd actually play it. I'd play it in regions like Whangarei and Rotorua. Just in some really strong Maori strongholds, and it doesn't get stronger than those 2 provinces. Maybe down in the Waikato. Although on saying that, you'll probably have complaints from the South Island as well if they're not getting in games. I think they're one of those teams you've got to move around, because if they're playing under the New Zealand Maori banner, it means that they've got to play at various venues. But you know what? I wouldn't take them to the bigger venues. I'd actually take them to the smaller venues like Hawke's Bay.
East Coast.
I think Manawatu. Yeah, maybe even East Coast. If I don't think
there's a venue big enough.
Yeah, I don't think there's a venue big enough down there. That's the only problem. But I know that it'll be. I know they'll get well fed with seafood at the end of the event. I want to go down and cover that game.
Simon's put in here Rotorua. Stephen, you also mentioned it. Now, I understand the cultural links. I understand the history. Or no, I understand. I don't fully understand it, but I do get that. However, Rotorua gets absolutely appalling attendance to the Mitre 10 Cup games compared to Tauranga. Put bluntly, it does not have a population. It does not have the sporting culture of going and seeing games there, unfortunately. So for me, if you're going to add another Super Rugby franchise, it doesn't matter what guys it's in, it has to be in Tauranga. Tauranga is the biggest city, the biggest population base without a Super Rugby team. It doesn't have the infrastructure. I get that would have to be built. But for me, you have to be looking at putting it where the audience is. And to me, it would have to be Tauranga. Would be my opinion.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, because numbers and finances will dictate it. But again, I feel that if this is structured correctly, and if there's proper consultation amongst the iwi, there are ways to keep this financially viable. There's definitely ways, and I think it's more to do with communal engagement as well, as Stephen rightly pointed out. And this will be a fantastic public relations opportunity for NZR, and also this very concept will actually sell out. By sell out, I mean have a lot of connectivity from right around the world, because New Zealand rugby, the haka and Maori culture is something overseas fans of All Blacks absolutely revere. So I think this is a fantastic opportunity. There will probably be creating more opportunity off the field than on the field.
No, Aaron, yes, it wouldn't be a Maori players were excluded from playing for the other Super Rugby franchises. They could still do that if they wanted to. Yes, no, it would be a team that was predominantly that. You may even have 1 or 2 players if there wasn't the quality. Because obviously, it's got to be a competitive team. Stephenson Minto suggests, he's all up for it being a kind of a travelling team, which would be an interesting way of doing it. Having their 5 games at different locations, all their 5 home games at different locations across the country, would be an interesting way of doing it. Jack wants to stick at 5 teams there. Now, just before we wrap up then, so Aaron says, Paul, don't be so mean. The audience wants to hear Boa talk about yellow and red cards. So, folks, we will have one of the main topics next week will be yellow and red cards from Boa, okay? We do not have the time to do it justice now. We have run out of time, and if I make him just talk about it for 2 minutes, he'll just get angry because I've not given him long enough. It's going to take longer than that, let's be honest. So There's no point doing it now because we just don't have time, but we will. That will be a key topic for next week.
Just a quick precursor. Have a look at the 2 yellow cards from last week's game, Argentina versus Australia. Oh my goodness me, what is this game coming to? So let's talk about that next week. Okay.
Except there were 3 yellow cards in that game, so you need to be a bit more precise than that. I think you mean the 2 yellow cards in the first half.
The 2 yellow cards for the clean out in the ruck. So it's fair to say the next clean out, if you want to be legal, you got to do it with your backside, because that way it's a nice soft big area. You make contact with your head, albeit accidentally. Surely that's not going to have any implications. So there you go, folks. Yeah, what can I say?
What we will also do is we'll have Stephen. We'll have Steve, not Stephen. We'll have Steve back, Cornflake back, because he'll want to talk about Angus Gardner. So yes, I will get the two big cards.
Angus Gardner.
I'll get the 2 big cards on for next week. Stephen, you're welcome to join, or you may skip that one if you fancy. But
I might get carded. Guys, I might get carded.
Angus Gardner couldn't pick a foot in touch 5 feet away. What makes anyone think he can pick anything else in a game of rugby? I mean, it's delusional, guys. Whoa, good Lord, what is the game going?
To add some balance, last year, was it last year or this year? I'm trying. I think it might be earlier this year. There was a survey of all the Super Rugby players within New Zealand, an anonymous survey to say who they thought was the best Super Rugby referee, and the players said Angus Gardner was the best Super Rugby referee. So
fake news, ladies and gentlemen. It's kind of like trying to kind of jimmy the HIA test in the season. So fake news.
Boa will be blaming Anti-Fafa next. It's not fake news. It's true.
I'm the wrong skin color, so that's not going to work. Don't worry about it.
See, we don't see. I can say, look, I don't see color. It's not a racial thing. You see, I can say that now because I've gone and anyway. So thank you, everybody. Thank you, Boa. Thank you, Stephen, for joining me. It's been a pleasure as always. As I say, next week the main topic will be cards, consistency of refereeing. We will have Cornflake back, and
we'll have some video cuts ready as well. So let's dissect that.
Sorry.
We'll have some videos ready for you folks as well. So let's have a look at that. And
no, we'll not have videos for you because unfortunately Sky would then give me a copyright breach, and I'd get the channel taken down. So unfortunately, we can't show you videos of the actual incident, but we might be able to come up with some sort of drawings or whatever. But I'll work with Boa on that.
Stick figures on whiteboard.
Yeah. Like I can say the Noodle Man.
So a couple of questions there. Something is swinging from the hips coming back. Yes, it will be. We just need to. We're just having a bit of issue with presenters and availability, but we will get swinging. We will get our cricket show back. I'm hoping to get to just to give some. I hope to get to a volleyball reenactment. Nocturnal Rights suggests reenactments instead. Look, my neck wouldn't cope with it. I'd do myself an injury just trying to pretend. So anyway. I need to bring us to the whole. It's all coming to a close. It's all been a bit of a mess. It's all fun. Thank you, guys. Thank you, everyone who's watched and joined us in the live chat. It's been fantastic. Thank you, everyone who listens on the podcast. We do appreciate it. Become a supporter of New Zealand Sport Radio. Head over to nzsportradio.com and become a supporter so that I can keep doing this and actually also eat. Thank you, folks, and good night.
Thank you.